Hey there, it's Philip from Manning the Fort. Today, let's look at the one thing our favorite undying space robots fear and how it relates to Flayed Ones. A lot of the information I'm pulling from for this video comes from the newest Necron novel, The Twice Dead King, Ruin by Nate Crowley. I'll try to avoid major spoilers, but we'll potentially be talking about some plot points as they relate to our topic today. I'm tempted to review the book as a whole because I did really enjoy it, but for now, I want to focus in on a couple of things that really stood out. With that out of the way, let's talk about the Dysphorakh. Fun note, I listened to Ruin as an audiobook, and the narration was great, so I wasn't 100% sure on how to spell Dysphorakh. I got close on my first try, but forgot the obligatory Necron H at the end. To understand the Dysphorakh, we need to start with a little bit on how the Necrons came to be. As most viewers will know, the Necrons were not always undying robots. They used to be biological beings of roughly humanoid proportions. For a variety of reasons, they suffered from illnesses and cancers that meant making it to age 40 was pretty remarkable. Through their monkey's paw deal for immortality with some tricksy star gods, their flesh bodies were atomized and their consciousnesses were transferred into the metal bodies we know them for today. Most of the society also lost all memory of their previous life, ending up as little more than mindless automata bound to the will of their superiors. The nobility, however, tended to keep their memories and their sentience. The minds that were copied over, however incompletely, were not meant for undying metal bodies, however. They had evolved as flesh and blood beings, and part of their subconscious still remembers that. On many occasions, the book's protagonist, Ultix, is very nearly overcome when that part of his subconscious is awoken and tries to assert control. This fragment of his being, called the Dysphorakh, grips him in primal terror when it realizes, say, that he isn't breathing, or that all of his organs are missing. Ultix essentially feels like he's constantly dying in 100 different ways until he can reassert control over the Dysphorakh. Nate Crowley is pretty clearly drawing from some real-world conditions and turning them up to the usual ludicrous 40k levels of grimdark. The first is obvious from the name Dysphorakh, which is very close to the real-world term dysphoria, which is defined as a profound state of unease or dissatisfaction. The other real-world condition this brought to my mind is phantom limb syndrome. In some cases, people who lose a body part are still able to feel it even after it's gone. For some, this is only a minor inconvenience, but others have documented feeling immense pain as the nervous system misfires for a limb that's no longer there. For the Necrons, though, the condition is for their entire bodies. Letting the Dysphorakh take control opens the door to insanity for the Necrons, and Ultix has to dissociate himself from thoughts and reminders that he once had a biological body on many occasions throughout the novel. Now that we have a basic understanding of the Dysphorakh, let's talk about Flayed Ones. After their transformation via the biotransference, the Necrons waged war on the C'tan star gods that had tricked them into their techno-undead state. Most of these immensely powerful beings could not be killed outright, but could be shattered into tiny slivers of their former selves. While these shards themselves were still formidable, the Necrons were able to turn the tables on them, enslaving those who aimed to enslave them. The one exception was the C'tan known as Clandagor the Flayer. The name is spelled with a double L, which the narration by Richard Reed pronounces closer to the Welsh fashion, hence the CL sound. The Necrons were able to slay this one C'tan, and common lore has held that it bestowed a sort of death curse on them in return. The line goes something like, "I am hunger, I am the Flayer, and now so are you." According to in-universe legend, the Necrons that slew Clandagor were the first victims of what became known as the Flayer virus, or Flayer curse, which caused them to feel a deep hunger for flesh, despite the fact that Necrons don't eat. Some older lore also talks about legions of Flayed Ones occupying entire planets and transmitting the dead C'tan's curse into the galaxy. While it's pretty obviously there as a good reason to give us robot ghouls to go along with our robot skeletons and robot liches, it's a pretty spooky concept. The thing is, Ruin takes that concept and makes it downright terrifying. While most of the Necrons take the idea of the death curse as the actual origin of the flare virus, the character Mentep in Ruin offers a different explanation. Mentep is a cryptech, specifically an engromancer. He's a Necron scientist who studies the minds of his species. In particular, Mentep is trying to understand what causes the flare condition to spread. While he admits there's still much to be learned, its origins may be less mystical than commonly believed. Those who let the Dysphorakh gain too much control will perpetually feel like they're starving to death for every single moment of their existence. They're driven by desperate, literal hunger to feed on the meat of anything they come across. But of course, not only do Necrons not need to eat, they literally can't. So there's no way to ever sate that hunger. I have to assume that the other parts of the Dysphorakh, like a Necron feeling like they're constantly asphyxiating, go along with that as well. So the Flayed Ones are not just twisted parodies of themselves, their entire eternal existence is a constant, never ending state of dying. That's frankly a pretty horrifying prospect, and it really plays into the Necron's hatred for anything biological. It's not just a sense of superiority, though that's definitely there too. Seeing or even thinking about anything biological risks the Dysphorakh rising from the corners of a Necron's mind. I can't remember for certain if it's said explicitly, but the reader's perspective through Ultics makes it very clear that it's basically the only thing his race actually fears. The word flesh is often spoken in derision, if at all, and when I looked at the ebook preview chapter from Black Library, I saw that in the written version, there are actually asterisks replacing some of the letters in the word flesh, as if it were the most vile curse word imaginable. As we see through Ultics, there does seem to be a direct link between the Dysphorakh and the Flayed Ones. At one point, just being touched by the bloody claw of one of the cursed is enough to rouse the Dysphorakh for Ultics, which is described as almost being a completely separate entity living inside him. Ultics also has several fragments of his own consciousness living separately inside his own mind, and it's one of those, the one formed only of his combat instincts, and thus with no memory of ever having a biological body, that saves him from being overwhelmed. The idea of the Dysphorakh is something that I don't recall reading about before, though my Xenos lore is far from complete. In the past, I always viewed the Necrons as these unfeeling, implacable monsters bent only on conquest, but Nate Crowley does an admirable job making them just a little more relatable. There are other topics in this book I might get into at some point, like the nature of memory and how it applies to the Necrons, or what reads an awful lot like dissociative identity disorder within Ultics himself. Suffice it to say that between Ruin and the Infinite and the Divine, the Necrons are getting some really good treatment in the lore recently. Actually, Xenos factions in general have been getting some good stuff. I also recently finished Brutal Cunnin by Mike Brooks, which, as the name suggests, gives some insights into the orcs. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Dysphorakh and the potential new explanation for the origins of Necron Flayed Ones, I'd appreciate it if you liked the video and subscribed to the channel. I also have an affiliate link in the description, and if you use that to buy the Twice Dead King Ruin, I will get a little bit of a kickback from Overlord Bezos. I'm getting closer to being able to do things like posting polls on YouTube asking all of you what you want me to cover going forward. I also did do a review of The Infinite and the Divine recently, which should be linked on screen right now. I've posted some hobby tutorials as well, and have some more of those in the works. Until next time, remember to thank your cleaner scarabs, and thanks for watching.